What is up, guys? EJ here, back with another video. So last week when I made my top 10 lists video of 1989, I mentioned that I saw Spectre, and I asked you guys if you wanted to see me do a videos on movie reviews. So this is the idea that I've come up with. I'm basically going to do a weekly roundup of all the movies I've seen over the week, and I'm going to call it my weekly roundup movie reviews. And this is going to be episode 1, and of course featuring my thoughts on Spectre. I won't go into too much detail on most of these films, especially since for this week, like I said in that previous video, I've been catching up on my Netflix. So I've seen a movie every day this week, so that's 7 movies I've got to talk about. And I don't want this to be like 20 minutes long, but I do want to talk about each of the movies I saw over the week. And so as I catch up on my Netflix, the videos will be shorter. Well, maybe they won't be shorter, but there'll be less movies to talk about because there'll only be about 2 or 3 movies a week that I'll be talking about, hopefully. But for the foreseeable future, at least the month of December, I've got a long backlog of movies on Netflix to talk about, to watch, and eventually talk about. So I'll keep those coming. So yeah, let's get into it. So last Saturday night, that was November 29th, I believe, I watched Spectre at the movie theaters, of course. Yeah, let's start at the beginning. So yeah, the scene in Mexico City was pretty cool, the opening scene. I saw a lot of people say it's like the best opening of a Bond film ever, and I just didn't really get that sense. It reminded me a lot of the opening of For Your Eyes Only, where Bond goes to visit his dead wife's cemetery, and then he gets ordered onto a plane back to MI6, and Blofeld is there controlling the pilot, and he kills the pilot, and then he takes control of the, not plane, helicopter, sorry. And then Bond has to fight to take back control of the helicopter. And it's a cool opening scene for a Bond film, sort of out of context for the rest of that movie, as most opening Bond scenes are. But this one, of course, like in all Daniel Craig's movies, have something to do with the plot of the eventual movie and sort of the whole Daniel Craig run as James Bond. They're all connected in a certain way. So it was a pretty cool fight scene on the helicopter above the square in Mexico City during the Day of the Dead celebration. But yeah, I didn't think it was the greatest opening to a James Bond film ever. I reserve that for Octopussy and Spy Who Loved Me, Goldfinger, and so on. Anyway, let's get on to the song. I was not a fan of the opening song by Sam Smith. Definitely no Skyfall. It's definitely not going to win any Oscars for Best Song of the Year. I've never heard Sam Smith before. I've heard his name, but like the variations in his voice, it was weird listening to it. I just did not think it was a great Bond song. As far as the rest of the movie, yeah, I mean, Daniel Craig's fine as Bond. I don't love him as Bond. He's certainly not my favorite, not even in my top 3. I like Connery more and Pierce Brosnan a lot more than Daniel Craig. I thought Christoph Waltz was good as Blofeld, of course, and Léa Seydoux, she was good as the heroine. My sister put it. I went to see the movie with my sister and her husband, my roommate, my brother-in-law. She put it after we got out. She's like, oh, she was good at being rescued. That's what she said about Léa Seydoux, who played Dr. Madeline Swan. Yeah, one of my big problems with this Bond movie is the sort of constant involvement of all the fringe characters. Of course, now we have a new M and Ray Fiennes and Ben Whishaw as Q and Naomi Harris as Moneypenny, and they sort of pop up throughout the film. In classic Bond films, you had like one scene with those characters, and that's what sort of defined a lot of those movies. I loved just the one Moneypenny scene in all the classic Bond movies, or the one Q scene. Now they just pop up like over and over again throughout the film. They play a much bigger part in these Daniel Craig movies. Um, yeah, Christoph Waltz was fine as Blofeld. I will say not enough Monica Bellucci. I mean, she appears in a couple of scenes early on, and then we never hear from her again. But yeah, the story of tying all the Daniel Craig Bond films together, sort of good and bad in a way, because it was the downfall of Quantum of Solace, I thought. And plus, overall, this film just did not have the emotional impact that Skyfall did. At least for me, I thought Skyfall was brilliant. But this, I mean, it was perfectly fine. I liked it. I enjoyed it a lot. Good action scenes, good set pieces. Like I said, most of the cast is good. I did like Dave Bautista as the silent henchman, Mr. Hinks. I knew when they were on that train in the desert, I'm like, we're gonna have a train fight sequence, a la the one in From Russia with Love or Live and Let Die with Grant in the first one, and Tee in the second one. Those are classic James Bond train fight sequences, and I knew we were going to get one once I saw them on the train. Yeah, it was an okay Bond film. I gave it the same rating as I gave Casino Royale, an 8 out of 10. It was a solid film. I'd probably say I like Casino Royale slightly better. Wasn't as good as Skyfall, not nearly as good in my opinion. Just didn't have the emotional impact of that movie. But it was a perfectly decent James Bond film. Sort of fitting end for Daniel Craig's run as Bond. Sam Mendes is a very good director. But yeah, just not as good as Skyfall. Okay, moving on to Sunday nights, November 30th. I watched Terminator Genisys, directed by Alan Taylor. Yeah, when I mentioned I was going to watch this film, Scott, aka Cineram, he's all, you'll be in for it when you watch Terminator 5, and he was like, my God, what a mess Terminator 5 was. Yeah, where do I begin? It's the worst of the Terminator films by far. I still gave it a 7 out of 10 because overall I enjoyed it. But my God, the different timelines, it was just way too much with that stuff. It was so confusing. What the hell's going on? Which timeline are we on? When is Judgment Day? Is it 97? Is it 2017 or whatever the hell they were talking about? I thought Emilia Clarke. I love her in Game of Thrones as Khaleesi, of course, Daenerys. Even though her performance in that is very wooden because she has to exude this regal attitude as mother of dragons, queen, etc. She's really good on that show, and I just thought she was sort of miscast in this movie as Sarah Connor. The guy who played Reese, Jai Courtney, I thought was pretty terrible. There was no chemistry between those two, as opposed to the great chemistry of Reese and Sarah Connor in the first film. Yeah, Michael Biehn and Linda Hamilton just awesome in the Terminator from '84. But yeah, Jai Courtney, I just got the same sense he was doing the same character he did in Die Hard 5, which was the least, just the worst of the Die Hard films. I know a lot of people have problems with Rise of the Machines and Salvation. Is that right? Terminator Salvation, the fourth one? But I like those movies a lot more than I like this film, and of course the first two are classics. The three, 4, and 5 don't touch the first two, but I like those. I like Rise of the Machines, and I liked Salvation. But this film, as a whole, I enjoyed it because it's a Terminator film. I thought the best parts of this movie was Arnold, old Arnie playing the Guardian and stuff. Pops, as he's called throughout the movie, which was kind of weird. But I really enjoyed J.K. Simmons as the old cop who they save early on in the movie. and he's been sort of chasing this futuristic robot theory throughout his career as a detective and so on. I just wish we saw more of him and more of his interaction. Um, what's his name? Jason Clarke is John Connor. Oh, what they did with John Connor's character just flat out pissed me off, to be honest. To make him and what they made him was kind of a joke, I thought. Uh, it was just way too many special effects with that character. And the whole idea of it seemed like they threw everything that happened in the previous Terminator movies, all the variations of Terminators show up in this film. At one point, I thought, when's the female Terminator going to show up? When's Kristana Loken or her equivalent, uh, modern equivalent, going to show up in this movie? Because that's what it felt like. It just felt like anything that was in the Terminator franchise, let's throw into this movie. You've got the opening uh, shots of the apocalypse and stuff, which I love seeing those kind of explosions and shit. But from then on, it was pretty much downhill. Emilia Clarke and Jai Courtney, big disappointment. Arnold was still awesome, and J.K. Simmons were really the only saving graces of this movie. Okay, up next on Monday night, November 30th, I watched Southpaw, the boxing film directed by Antoine Fuqua, starring, of course, Jake Gyllenhaal as Billy Hope, a young, well, he's not that young, he's like 43-0, lightweight boxing champion, seemingly on top of the world, with a beautiful wife played by Rachel McAdams, and a young daughter. Of course, he's sort of gearing up for a fight with this new rival, a Colombian boxer, and then during a fight argument at a hotel, at a charity dinner or something, his wife gets shot and killed, and it sort of deals with the aftermath of Jake Gyllenhaal's Billy Hope's life. He loses his daughter to child services because he can't take care of her. Basically loses his boxing license, sort of goes off the deep end in the ring at one point, and then loses all his money and his house and all that kind of stuff. And then basically to scrape out a living, he joins a gym run by Forrest Whitaker, who was pretty good in this movie. And of course, he's a old school boxing trainer, very letter of the law. So yeah, it's a nice redemption story. I will say the final boxing scene at the end was a little disappointing. They sort of gloss over a bunch of rounds. It's like round 3, round 4, and the girls holding up the signs, of course, in the bikinis and stuff, which I don't mind seeing. But it was like I want to see some boxing, man. But yeah, it was a pretty cool movie. Boxing movies usually tend to make great sports movies. This was a good film, a solid film, not a great film, compared with recent boxing films like The Fighter and Rocky and Cinderella Man and all those great films. But yeah, it was a good, solid movie, Southpaw. Okay, up next on, what the hell night are we on? I think Tuesday nights, yeah, December 1st, I watched The Woman in Black 2, Angel of Death. Don't really know much about the director or most of the cast. It's directed by Tom Harper. I will say that I really did enjoy the first, The Woman in Black, with Daniel Radcliffe. Yeah, I just like good old-fashioned Victorian ghost stories set in England, of course. It's kind of what I grew up listening to, these sort of ghost stories. I lived in sort of houses growing up that were very eerie, and you always heard stories about houses and the places where I lived and stuff. And the first movie reminded me of that, and I like Daniel Radcliffe. He was just like sort of this guy walking around this old house in the dark with a lamp, and sort of this great story about once you see this ghost, this woman in black, a child dies. The beginning of this film was good. I mean, set during World War II. Of course, the bombings in London during the Blitz. A lot of the kids' schools got sent up to live in the countryside to get away from all that. And this film starts out with two women. One's played by Helen McCrory. She played the sort of mean older lady. I like her in. She was in this past season of Penny Dreadful. Yeah, she played the main witch in the second season of Penny Dreadful. A great Showtime show that I like watching with Timothy Dalton, Josh Hartnett, Ava Green. Um, I liked her. I liked her in Penny Dreadful, and she's good as the sort of headmistress, and then there's a young teacher who's looking after these like 6 or 7 kids. They go up to the house, of course, the Woman in Black house. It's kind of weird though. Like I remember in the first movie, like there was an actual town where these kids would die, and then when in this new movie, when they get there, it's like a couple of burnt out old buildings surrounded by trees on the side of a road. There was like nothing about like the rest of the town. There's a whole bit with a young pilot, so there's sort of a love interest for the young teacher and his weird motivations. And this film just sort of, I think it got too influenced by most modern American horror movies like the Insidious films and Sinister and those type of movies. All the same type of effects and jump scares that you see in those movies kept on happening over and over again in this film, and it just got repetitive and boring. And it just took away sort of the creepy atmosphere that was sort of so central and part of the first movie that I liked. This film just, it started out well, like I said, but then sort of descending into the normal modern horror cliches that you see in most modern horror movies. Okay, talking about cliches, let's move on to Wednesday, December 2nd. I watched Taken 3 finally. Kind of weird. The reason I'm watching Taken 3 and The Woman in Black 2 this week, which came out in January. So usually with my Netflix, whatever movie comes out on the Friday, as movies come out on Friday, I just go to see what's coming out, and then I just add them to my Netflix queue. And then usually when they come out on Blu-ray or DVD, I'll get them in the mail. Usually if my slate is clean, I'll get them the day they come out. But apparently when these two came out in January, I didn't add them to my Netflix queue, and I was like, people will ask me, have you seen Taken 3? I'm like, no, I haven't. And I realized I forgot to add it back in January, and same with The Woman in Black too. That's why I just got around to watching them now, as opposed to back in like June or July when they originally came out on Netflix. Anyway, that's going off track. Taken 3, directed of course by Olivier Megaton and written and produced by Luc Besson, who's had a part, I think, in all 3 of the Taken movies. I liked the first Taken movie a lot. The second one was kind of ridiculous, but at least in that film, people actually get taken at the beginning of the movie, and then you have Liam Neeson giving his speech, his famous "I will find you, I will kill you," his whole spiel. But this film is just, I mean, there's not even a part where somebody gets abducted at the beginning of the movie. I mean, his wife, of course, played by Famke Janssen, gets murdered, and Liam Neeson is framed to be the prime suspect, and of course he goes on the run, and his primary goal is, of course, to protect Maggie Grace, his daughter, from the evil stepfather or would-be stepfather. I don't know. Dougray Scott plays that character, and it's the usual Taken stuff. Liam Neeson just outsmarting the police and the bad guys and kicking a lot of ass, which is fine. Takes place in Los Angeles, which was kind of a nice change as opposed to somewhere in Europe. I did like Forrest Whitaker as the detective. He played a good, smart cop in this movie. So the exchanges between those two and the whole bit with the bagels was kind of cool. When he picked up the bagels at the beginning of the investigation, I'm like, can't they just figure out that he went and bought these bagels, and it's not gonna match the timeline of the time of death? Famke Janssen. I mean, that would save him the whole trouble of trying to hunt him down. And of course, that gets mentioned at the end when they finally meet and talk after all this shit's gone down. Yeah, Taken 3, it's perfectly fine thriller, but again, this could be any of Liam Neeson's movies over the past couple years, like Unknown and One All Night, and the other one I'm forgetting the name. Yeah, it was fine. Probably the worst of the Taken movies, but most people don't like him to begin with. Okay, up next on Wednesday nights, November 3rd, I watched the Babadook, the Australian horror film from 2014. Yeah, I heard about this film quite a bit last year or this recent year. I see a lot of people talking about it as one of the best horror films of 2014, and I've decided just to add it this week, and I got it this week. Yeah, directed by Jennifer Kent. Um, yeah, cool little Aussie horror film. Essie Davis plays the mother, this poor mother, Amelia, dealing with a unruly son, Samuel, a very violent kid, screams a lot. This poor girl, she works in a nursing home and comes home to deal with this son. And one night she reads this book about the Babadook, this sort of monster in the house, monsters in the bedroom, that kind of thing. Yeah, cool, interesting movie. Uh, Sort of towards the end, it sort of delves into all the special effects and stuff. But I like sort of the premise of it, and I like the performance by Essie Davis. She was really fantastic, really something in this film. The range of emotions she goes through as sort of the caring mother to being sort of angry at the child and dealing with her relatives, her sister-in-law or something like that. There's a lot of shit she has to go through, and she puts the kid through a lot as well. I mean, she turns on a dime in some of the scenes where she's just like the sweet, sort of innocent-looking woman, and into this sort of uncontrollable anger. It was kind of awesome to see, and yeah, the Babadook. It was kind of a cool little film. I dug it. Okay, after embarrassing myself, let's move on to Tomorrowland, which I watched last night, November 4th. Yeah, Friday night. I really enjoyed the heck out of this film, directed by Brad Bird, of course, who brought us The Incredibles. I love movies like this, just sort of movies that sort of stir the imagination. It's a movie about dreamers. Starts off with this kid going to the World's Fair in New York in 1964, and then somehow gets magically recruited to this beautiful futuristic city. Um, yeah, where inventors and artists and scientists gather to create all these wonderful things. George Clooney, of course, plays the older version, and then, of course, a young girl called Casey, played by Britt Robertson, who's a dreamer herself, loves looking up at the stars, lives in Florida. She's trying to stop the demolition of the launch platform at Cape Canaveral, and she gets given the magic pin that takes her to this futuristic city in another dimension. Yeah, I thought the cast was terrific. Clooney, when she hooks up with Clooney and she's trying to get into his house and all that kind of stuff, and she's like, "You're the only one I got dropped off in front of your door, and you won't let me in." All that stuff is great, and the sort of banter they have throughout the movie is just really fun. But the real star of this movie, I thought, was the little girl who played Athena, Raffi Cassidy. I thought she was absolutely wonderful as the little girl robot. She was just great. I absolutely loved her. Everything about this movie, it was a complete surprise for me. I mean, when I first saw the trailer, I thought that'll be cool. I'll dig that. but I absolutely loved it. I thought it was a great sort of families sci-fi adventure film. That sort of I love these type of movies because it showed me something different. Movies that I give 9 out of 10s to, or tens, which I gave this. I gave a 9 out of 10. It's my favorite film of the year so far. I just want to see. I want to see something different, and this film showed me something different. And sort of a great cast. I love Clooney, and I thought Britt Robertson was great. I saw her a couple weeks ago in The Longest Drive. Was that a sort of romantic movie? Uh, that she was in a Nicholas Sparks novel-based movie. I watched that. What was it? The Longest Ride? Yeah, because it's about a rodeo um, cowboy, and she's like a art student or something. I didn't think much of her in that film because it's a Nicholas Sparks movie. I love The Notebook. Don't get me wrong, but we've had a few more of those films in recent years like that. She was fine in that. I like Laurie in this as well. He was like the governor of the futuristic city. Um, yeah, just a really fun movie. I was really surprised to see it didn't do that well, and like the ratings on the IMDb aren't that good. It's only got like a 6.5 on the IMDb. Um, I guess a lot of people didn't like it, but I absolutely loved it. I thought it was great fun. Just the type of movie that I enjoy seeing. Sort of inspires you and um, stirs the imagination, that kind of thing. It's the type of movie I've always liked. So those are the 7 movies. That's my weekly roundup for episode 1 of this series. Let's see how it goes. Let me know what you think of all these movies. If I didn't mention the rating for each movie I saw, I'll put a little annotation for each film. The rating I gave it: Spectre 8 out of 10, Terminator 7, Southpaw I think I gave a 7, The Woman in Black 2 I gave a 5, Taken 3 I gave a 6, Babadook I gave a 7, and Tomorrowland I gave a 9. Um, but yeah, thanks for watching. Let me know what you think of all these movies if you've seen them, obviously, and what you think of this video idea. So hopefully I'll be doing this each week, and I'll see you soon.
Bond.